I know some of you guys could talk for a long time about this, right? Yeah, I could probably go on for a long time, but all right. Have you ever felt helpless when trying to help a friend? Trying to help a friend. I had a friend in high school. The only friend that I had who requested and thanked me for punching them in the face. So he was a really. So I went to a super I went to a magnet high school. It was really nerdy. It was called the Academy for the Advancement of Science and Technology. Okay, that's the name of my school. Okay, so you had to test to get in. I had a friend. His last name was Bernstein, but he was Japanese. He was adopted. Smart guy, really fun. Loved to have fun. Right about sophomore year, he started to deal drugs to just make money, and then he started to take a lot of drugs. So then he would get high every day, and I would try to help him as best I could. He started failing out of his classes, and so I would tutor him as best I could. And there basically got to a point where if he failed the next exam, then he would have had to get kicked out of school. So that whole week, I'm trying to help him, and I'm trying to also convince him to take his life seriously. The day of his exam comes, and he comes up to me, clearly high, and he's like, "Joe, are you my friend?" When somebody asks you that, you gotta watch out, right? I was like, "Dude, you know I'm your friend, but I can't," because I thought he was gonna ask me to take the exam from him. He's like, "No. I said, are you my friend?" It's like, "Yeah, you know I'm your friend." He's like, "Hey, I need you to punch me in the face." That was his solution for kind of getting out of his high. So anyway, we went to the back hallway, and I was a good friend to him. So he woke up. He took the exam. He passed. So good. But he didn't stop smoking. So he failed the next exam, and then he got kicked out of school. So yeah. So unfortunate. I actually still think about him from time to time. Thought about him actually as I was kind of preparing for today's message. It's a text from John 5. We're going through the book of John, and it's a really fascinating story about someone who was partially healed, someone who Jesus tried to heal but was not healed fully. Even Jesus could not heal this person fully. Now, I don't know about you, but I need healing in my life because there are things about my life, there are things about my thought life, my actions that are broken. There are things about my relationships that are broken. There are things about me that don't work right. So there are parts of me that need healing. And I think today's text is going to show us that Jesus has the power to heal, but there are certain things that can prevent his healing from happening in our lives. Okay, so let's dive in. So John 5. Hopefully you have your handout with you, and the text is there. So verse 1, after this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. I'm going to make a quick aside here. Some of you guys would be really excited about this, and some of you guys would not care at all, okay? But the topic here is biblical archaeology. Okay, so turns out they actually found the ruins to this place. Here's what it looks like. Fun fact, skeptics actually for many years thought this whole story was fabricated because 5 colonnades, like, what is that? They never saw that before. So they thought this whole thing was just a myth. The Bible is a myth until they found the place, right? They found it, and actually biblical archaeology is a really amazing field if you ever want to kind of get into that. So the Bible is not myth. It actually makes a lot of historical claims. Okay, so, all right. This is an artist's rendition of what it might have looked like at the time. Okay, so here's this area, and then there's a pool right in the middle. So let's continue on in verse 3. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, right? Around this pool, this beautiful pool, are a bunch of sick people. And the reason is that there was a myth. There was a superstition at the time because this pool would randomly bubble up. Okay, it would randomly bubble up. And so people thought this pool has healing properties. They thought that when it bubbled up, there would be an angel that came down and touched the pool. And so now the pool has healing properties. And so that's why there were all these people who were sick around the pool. The thing is, you had to be the first one in. Only the first one in gets healed by this pool. Now, they later found out through the archaeological digs that there's a lot of limestone underneath. And so limestone actually emits CO2, and that's probably where the bubbling comes from. But at the time, that was the myth, okay? So that's the scene, okay? For the rest of the text, I'd like for you to read that in groups of like 3 or 4, okay? So go ahead and read the rest of the text in groups of 3 or 4. And after you're done, you can discuss these questions, because this healing account is actually very different from a lot of other healing accounts that we find in the Bible, okay? So go ahead and read and discuss. So that last question, like, it's a little bit different, this healing account. Usually when Jesus heals someone, it's more than just a physical healing. He always wants to make a personal connection, right? So that there's relational kind of healing, there's spiritual healing. There's usually rejoicing and worship after he heals someone, right? So when John 9, when the man born blind, he is healed, he worships Jesus. The paralytic with the 4 friends, right? That famous scene where they bring him down through the roof. Like Jesus says, I see your faith, your sins are forgiven, and then they worship God. Blind Bartimaeus, Jesus heals him, he praises God, and then he follows Jesus on the way to Jerusalem. That's the pattern, right? Rejoicing, praising God. But here, we don't see that. We see the physical healing, but then the man does not move towards Jesus. His heart seems unchanged. So the Jews, they ask him, like, hey, what's going on? Like, he technically violated the rules of the Sabbath as they had it, because he was doing work by lifting up his mat. But then, so they're like, hey, like, why are you doing this? And he's like, oh, it's because that guy healed me, right? He doesn't even know his name. He doesn't even know his name. Like, he never even bothered to ask Jesus what his name was. Later in verse 14, when Jesus finds him, like Jesus approaches him, he says, see, you are well, sin no more. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. Yeah, he might have been physically healed, but there's still something spiritually sick about him, right? And then, like, what happens after that, it's not like he changes there. It says, then the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him, right? So he reports Jesus to the Jews, and then now Jesus, like, has to deal with that. So in today's message, we're going to go cover this question, like, what prevents true healing in our lives? Like, what is it about this guy that led to him not being fully healed? Okay. So what prevents true healing? So the first one, superstition. Okay, superstition. What was he focused on? Right? What did he think would heal him? It's this mythical pool, right? This mythical pool. Now imagine the scene at this pool. You got all these people around the pool, and only the first one in gets healed. How do you think the relationships were around that pool? Pretty chummy? Maybe like some of your classes? Maybe a little bit like how you're feeling when you apply to your internships or your jobs. Because there's only a limited amount of spots, right? So we look at this picture and we're like, oh, these silly people, how could they believe in such a thing? And yet that dynamic of being around the pool, competing for a limited spot, I think we know exactly what that feels like. Here's this guy. Now here's the thing, he's lame, right? He can't walk. But he looks at all these people jump. Now who's going to be the one who jumps in the pool first? Right? It's not going to be Mr. Paralytic, right? It's going to be like Mr. Stomachache, right? He jumps in like, whatever, right? So, but he's like looking at this people jumping in here and like, oh, wow. Now, did the pool actually have power? No, I mean, maybe like it would have been a nice like hot tub bath kind of thing, right? Like, but in terms of actually being able to heal him, like it didn't have that power, right? Do you ever believe in superstitions? My kid said this recently, step on a crack, break your mother's. Yeah, you guys know that one, right? Adults, the most superstitious people that I know are baseball players. They're incredibly superstitious. They refuse to walk on the lines, you know. They have these weird rituals with their bats. The weirdest one that I heard was someone who got on a winning streak and decided that it was because of his lucky underwear. And so he did not change his underwear until they lost, and they went on a 12-game winning streak. Did that actually help them win the baseball game? Like, no, right? No. So, but why do we do this kind of thing, right? Why do we do this kind of thing? I think it's because there's something that we really want, right? So again, imagine this scene, competitive around the pool, limited spots. I think it's such a profound picture of modern day life. Because in reality, I think we also look at some mythical pools in our lives. And we say, man, if only I had that. If only I had that, it would heal me. It would fix me. It would fix all my problems. This loneliness that I feel, this insecurity that I feel, this loss of identity that I feel, like who am I in this world? If I only had that, it would heal me. Oh man, and then you see all these people getting in there, right? Because there's only a limited amount of spots. Oh man, if only I could have that, right? If only I could have the popularity. If only I could kind of be with that crowd and experience what they're experience, right? This scene we often see through a screen, right? Like how many of these scenes have you seen? Like, man, if only I had that, right? If only I had that. Well, all of these really are superstitions. They don't lead to what you think or what the world tells you that they lead to. Because again and again and again, people jump into these pools only to find out that it does not heal them, right? People who get into these positions, Joel, he gave a Bible study last semester about purpose, and he was talking about like how he, like even in his job, like with his coworkers, you know, if you talk to any of the people who have coworkers, like I worked at Apple for like 12 years. You think it like, it doesn't heal you. So we look at that scene from a long time ago and we go, wow, actually we're just as foolish as they are. Because what is it that we're pursuing that you think will heal you, right? It is that modern day pool. We're looking for the solution in the wrong place. This pool cannot heal this man. Cannot heal this man. But Jesus can. So now Jesus enters into this scene. Now, what's the second thing that prevented true healing in his life? And I think Jesus sensed it, actually, based on the question that he asks him. Because he asks him a crazy question. Like, this must be one of the most obvious questions you can ask. But it turns out that he asks this question, do you want to be healed? After he saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time. Oh, he's been here for a long time? Let me ask this question. Do you want to be healed? It seems like a crazy question until you hear the answer, right? This is a yes or no question. And the obvious answer is yes. But that's not what he says. What does he say? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And when I'm going, another steps down before me. What is this man's view of the world? What is his view of other people? What's his view of himself? Like, if you spend enough time with someone, you kind of hear what's on their mind, right? And you kind of get a sense of their story. What's someone's story? This person's story is like it's other people's fault, right? Like I have no one, like people are supposed to help me out here, but I have no one to put me into the pool. And then like even if I try, like all these other people, they cut right in front of me and they take my spot. This is the story that he's telling about his life. How do you make sense of your own life? I think psychologically we all are drawn to story, right? We all create a narrative around what we experience. So what's your story? What's your narrative? What's the modern way of saying this? What's your lore, right? What's your lore? What's your origin story, right? Like, because we think in narrative, we think in story. So what's your story? And we all tell our stories based on what we remember, right? Now, I don't know about you, but like most stories have good guys and bad guys, okay? In my story, I'm usually the good guy, okay? I'm the main character. And then there are bad guys, right? Like my enemies, the people who are against me, right? So they're the good guys, they're the people who are for me, my allies. They're the people who are against me, right? My enemies. And that's sort of like how I think about my story. Well, again, it kind of depends on what you remember. Now, the thing about our memories is that they're episodic, right? You don't remember everything. You remember certain things about your life. And based on what you decide to remember, you can tell a certain story. So, Ian Hacking is a Canadian philosopher. He says this: each of us becomes a new person as we redescribe the past. Such an interesting idea, right? Like, what's your story? Who are you? Who are you? Actually, based on what you decide to remember, you can redescribe your past and then tell a different story about who you are, right? So, what is it that you remember about your past? Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever babysat kids, I think kids are the easiest way to tell, because you got to hear both sides, right? In a very hypothetical situation, when I took my kids to Disneyland, like, it's amazing, it's magical, right? That place is magical. Like how they do like all the sights and the sounds, and someone had given us some money to like, kind of take our kids there. It's like, okay, cool. And then they got all the things and whatever, you know. And then we went to like their favorite like dessert place or whatever, right? And then we went to McDonald's, and because they wanted to go to McDonald's, and then they all got Happy Meals, right? And then one of my kids, hypothetically, let's say one of my kids, got a Happy Meal toy that was like not as good as the other one. And then she lost it, right? Like, this is so unfair. How come this is? I'm like, excuse me, like we just came from like the happiest place on earth, right? And we spent the whole day doing that. And now what you remember is like this Happy Meal toy that like your sister got a nicer one than you did, right? It's like, wait a minute. Like, what are you choosing to remember here, right? One of them often comes up to me and tells me about something like, oh, you know, my sister said that I was stupid. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Okay, let's investigate what happened, you know? Well, yeah, and it turns out, like, your sister told you not to take her thing, and she warned you that if you did, like, it could break, and then you took it and you broke it. And then she called you stupid, you know? It's like, well, you failed to tell that part of the story. Like, all you told is, so how you tell your story, like, in recent years, sociologists, they've noticed a rise in what they call parental estrangement cases. Okay, parental estrangement cases. These are adult children who decide when they grow up to disown their parents. They want nothing to do with their parents anymore. And often they do that because it's based on how they remember their childhood. They look back and they think, man, like my parents, they yelled at me, they grounded me, whatever. Like they didn't get me the latest iPhone or whatever it was, right? And my parents traumatized me. And so they cut their parents off and they want nothing to do with them. There's actually a huge rise in these cases. And often the parents are completely surprised. They're shocked at this sudden rejection. Psychologist Josh Colson, he writes about this because he received so many more of these cases. And he writes in the Atlantic, parents and adult children seem to be looking at the past and present through very different eyes. Estranged parents often tell me that their adult child is rewriting the history of their childhood, accusing them of doing things they didn't do or failing to acknowledge the ways in which the parent demonstrated their love and commitment. Adult children frequently say the parent is gaslighting them by not acknowledging the harm they caused and are still causing, failing to respect their boundaries, and or being unwilling to accept the adult child's requirement for a healthy relationship. Turns out a lot of these families are upper middle class, right? Which is why kind of, you didn't give me the latest iPhone or whatever it is, right? How you remember your childhood has a profound impact on your relationship with your parents, right? If you picked out all the moments where like your parents maybe like had a bad day, they yelled at you unfairly, they were a little bit too harsh to you. They didn't acknowledge like how you're feeling or how important something was at that time. And if you just took those things and made like a 2-minute reel of that, your parents would be like just monsters. They'd be so terrible. And if you choose to remember those parts of that story, that would be your story about your parents. But that would also be leaving out a whole lot, right? That would be leaving out a lot of what they've done for you. How they provided for you, how they bought stuff for you, like all of this stuff. Except that we tend not to remember a lot of those things, right? In fact, it's shown that you remember negative things way more than positive things, right? Negative experiences much more than positive experiences. Something about 5 to 9 times you remember the negative things more than the positive things. It's okay, so maybe not your parents, but for all the spouses in the room, okay? All the spouses in the room. As you think about your relationship with your spouse, what are the moments that you remember, right? All the roommates. As you think about your roommates, okay? Who is the best roommate and who is the worst roommate? What have you done versus what have they done? What is it that you choose to remember in your experience with your roommates? Nowadays, a lot of people, what they do is they just cut relationships off, right? It's like this person was toxic because what I remember are these things. And so I'm going to cut the relationship off. And more people are utterly alone. This person in our story, he says, like, I have no one, right? I have no one. I think this is so true of people today because they have a warped lens of their past. And so this is why Jesus says, do you want to be healed? Jesus is offering healing, but this person is so stuck in his story that he can't even respond to the question of Jesus' offer to be healed. What's his story? It's a story of blame. It's a story of blame. Like, oh, it's because of this. The reason I'm here right now, the reason I'm broken in this way is because of this, person, it's this situation, or whatever it is. His story is a story of blame. He can't even respond to the God of the universe who's here offering healing. If you see your own life as a story of blame or self-pity, it's going to be hard for Jesus to heal you. It's going to be hard for Jesus to come and transform your heart and for the gospel story to break in through your story. And so that leads us to the third thing that prevents true healing, right? Sin. It's sin. Specifically, his view of sin. There are people who have a hard time accepting the gospel because for them, sin is not in here, right? Sin is not in here. Sin is out there. Sin is like what other people have done to me because my story is a story of blame. Irrelevant sin is not anything that I've done but what people have done to me. The gospel assumes a very different story. It's not the story where you or I are the righteous, suffering victim, right? The gospel story is, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. At AWC, Cliff Connectley often uses this phrase, right? Like, I'm a dirty, rotten sinner. That was very clear for him. The gospel story says that you and I are both sinners. Yes, there are times when people have wronged you. That too is true because they sinned against you. At the same time, the larger story, the bigger story, are all the ways that we've wronged other people too. All the ways that we've sinned. The bigger truth is acknowledging that more than how people have wronged you, we have each wronged God. Because God has provided everything in our lives. God has provided good things, mercy, love, grace, and yet we regularly reject his authority, his fathership, his lordship. in our lives. To accept the gospel, you have to get out of your story. It's not, that's the problem. It's no, I'm the problem. If there was a perfect family, and then I entered into that family, I would ruin that perfect family. If there was a perfect group of friends, and I entered into that group of friends, I would ruin that group of friends. Because I'm broken. And so that psychologist kind of ends this way in his article. He says, we are all flawed. We should have that at the forefront of our minds when deciding who to keep in or out of our lives. That's basically the secular way of saying, like, we're all sinners, right? Romans says, there is no one righteous, right? There's no one righteous. What story do you tell about your life? What story do you tell about your life? If someone were to ask you, what's your story? Like, what would come out of your heart? Now, what does that story produce in your life? Because here's the thing, if your story is blame-oriented, then you're stuck. You've got nowhere to go. Because if the problem is always out there, you're going to be chasing these superstitious pools that will never actually heal you, but you're going to just stay paralyzed for 38 years because you're stuck. A story where you're the victim and everyone else is to blame leads nowhere. But the gospel story that says, yes, there have been wrongs that have been done to me, but I've wronged others too. And in fact, my life, my heart, I'm so selfish. I'm so self-centered. Like, I so easily forget about other people, the amount of pride and envy and lust in my heart. If you see that truer story, where does that lead you? It leads you into a relationship with Jesus. It leads you into a relationship with Jesus. It leads you to being humble and open. It leads you to being able to be filled with a new story. A new story is possible. Because even though you are very sinful, you're also very loved. Even though you've done much wrong, you are very forgiven. So a new story can begin. And it's a story of gratitude and joy and security in your relationship with God. That's the Christian journey. It's to say, I'm done with my own story, my own version, my own selected version of my own story, and I want to be part of the larger story, right? God's story.